my name's Heather and I'm a horticulturist here in Colorado. Today I thought we'd talk a little bit about some common problems with garden tomatoes to help you diagnose what they are and increase your yield. One of the most obvious things you might notice about your tomatoes are yellowing leaves. And yellowing leaves are a pretty difficult thing to diagnose because it could be anything from the way you're watering to a nutrient deficiency. I want to mention that it's pretty typical for a tomato to show some yellowing leaves when it makes a transition from its vegetative stage to its reproductive stage. So it's quite normal to see some yellowing, particularly of the bottom leaves, when your plant begins to flower and start setting fruit. It's important then to pay attention a little bit to where on the plant you're noticing yellow leaves. Yellow leaves at the bottom of a plant are typically an indicator of a nitrogen deficiency. Nitrogen is one of the primary macronutrients that plants need, and it's often taken by the younger leaves from the older leaves. It's a mobile type of nutrient. And so if you're noticing only yellow leaves at the bottom, this could be a sign or an indicator of low nitrogen, which means you could increase your nitrogen fertilizer or simply pick off those leaves. Generally, if you've got some pretty healthy soil, nitrogen isn't that limiting, and you can address the problem with a pretty basic fertilizer that has a high first number. If you're noticing yellow leaves that are only on one side of your plant, it could be due to a bacterial infection called Fusarium wilt. And this one's a little trickier, but you'll notice wilting and yellowing leaves on one side of your plant. This is a pretty tricky thing to treat. I just let that one go. If you're noticing a lot of yellow leaves that are inside the plant, this can also be because of light and air circulation. As your plants grow and mature, the tiny little branches that are inside, kind of the thicker part of where your tomato growth is occurring, can sometimes block light. And if plants aren't getting enough light, they'll shed those leaves in order to increase that. One way to help prevent that is to take a look at these little suckers that grow kind of in, this is where the petiole of a leaf joins the main stem, and simply pinch those off. This can also help increase yield. If you're seeing a lot of leaf growth, but not a lot of actual fruit production, that can help as well. One thing to keep in mind, if you are noticing plants that have very little fruit, but plenty of green leaves, it could be that you actually have gone the other route and you have too much nitrogen in your soil. This is typical often if you've used grass clippings in order to mulch around your plant. So if you're seeing a whole lot of green, healthy leaves, but not a lot of actual flower production, it can be that your nitrogen levels are too high. This is pretty easy to fix as well, as nitrogen is used by plants very quickly and by a lot of plants, by all plants. And so just reducing the amount of kind of green material you're adding to your garden if you're using compost. And if you're using a multi-purpose fertilizer, just hold off on using anything with a high first number. One very common problem in tomatoes is what's called blossom end rot. And it's when on a maturing tomato, you're noticing that there's a lot of yellow or blackening just on the base of the fruit. And when that happens, that's a problem called blossom end rot. And that's typically two different ways that we can address this. One of them is that consistent watering. Being able to provide kind of a steady and a regular supply of water to your plants is a great way to make sure they stay healthy, both from yellowing leaves and blossom end rot. If you can, water at the same time every day and water around the same amount, or use a timer in order to do that. Blossom end rot can also be the sign of a calcium or magnesium deficiency. Two different ways that you can address that in your soil is by adding things that are high in those things, in those two nutrients. So calcium you can get from crushed up eggshells. Magnesium can come in from Epsom salts. And there's a lot of course, just available organic and inorganic fertilizers that have those micronutrients as well. I hope this has been helpful and leads to a lot higher yields in your tomato plants. If you'd like to learn more about things in your garden, then follow me on my YouTube channel and subscribe below.